Today, I'm going to answer what the best NFL team in history is. The question is, though, is it the 85 Bears, the 72 Dolphins, or even the 07 Patriots? Well, to be honest, it's kind of a loaded question. One we may never be able to accurately answer. After days of research, I think I may have come to a conclusion on what the best team ever is. While there are endless ways you could try to figure out who the best team in the NFL of all time is, I really don't feel like there's one specific way, but it's more or less like a compilation of all different types of attributes and stats and even historical records to go on. So I feel like we need to combine a lot of these to figure out truly who the best team of all time is. The first team I would like to mention that truly doesn't get enough love compared to the others is the 1986 New York Football Giants. They won the Super Bowl, had a 14-2 record, while having the MVP and Defensive Player of the Year in Lawrence Taylor, which is the GOAT football player, at least in my opinion. It's a little biased because I'm a Giants fan. A couple of other teams that really deserve their name to be said are the 1999 St. Louis Rams, better known as the greatest show on turf, and the 1984 San Francisco 49ers. Coming in here at number 6, I have the New England Patriots, or my honorable mention, I guess. The reason they fall this low is strictly because they lost the Super Bowl to the New York Giants that year. But regardless of all of that, I feel like any team that has Brady and Moss is already an all-time great team. They're the best quarterback of all time and the second best or third best wide receiver of all time. And then on top of that, you add Bill Belichick into the equation, that team just gets so much better. As we all know by now, that Pats team would go undefeated in the regular season and stay that way until the Super Bowl, where they would lose to the Cinderella New York Giants. That's the only reason this Pats team can't go any higher, strictly because they didn't win the Super Bowl compared to the rest of these teams. But anyway, that team would be led by the consensus GOAT in Tom Brady, who would win MVP and Offensive Player of the Year that year. He would also lead all quarterbacks in yards, touchdowns, completion percentage, and QBR. He pretty much swept the board. Not only would they have Brady, but they would have arguably the most talented wide receiver ever in Randy Moss. Moss would lead all wideouts that year with 23 touchdowns and have the second most yards, only behind Reggie Wayne. But wait, there's more. I mean, come on, people. These are the best teams of all time. The Patriots would have a top 5 defense led by legends such as Rodney Harrison, Vince Wilfork, Mike Vrabel, Teddy Bruschi, and Asante Samuel. While yes, this Patriots team would come up just short of winning it all, it goes down in history as one of the best to ever do it. Coming in here at number 5, I have the 1989 San Francisco 49ers. Now, unfortunately, they do fall this far, and it's not really any reason why, but they do fall this far. And they did go 14-2 in the regular season. They won the Super Bowl against the Denver Broncos 55-10, I believe. They were just unstoppable. It was crazy. And this team is probably the most feared team in the history of the NFL. The 49ers would have 4 Hall of Famers on this team, including the best safety of all time, the best wide receiver of all time, and the second best quarterback of all time. Oh, and not to mention a top 10 pass rusher of all time. Those names would be Ronnie Lott, Jerry Rice, Joe Montana, and Charles Haley. Montana would win MVP and Offensive Player of the Year and have one of the best completion percentages ever at 70.2%. Not only would the Niners have him, they would also have the league leading receiver in both touchdowns and yards in Jerry Rice. The Niners would end the season with a 3rd ranked defense and have the number 1 ranked offense in the league. This would cause a point differential of plus 191 points in the 49ers' favor. That's crazy to think about. Unfortunately, the lack of Hall of Famers and even All-Pro players on this team lowers them compared to the competition above them. And unfortunately for myself, this hurts to say that the 4th best team of all time is the 1992 Dallas Cowboys. I hate the Cowboys. I'm a Giants fan. I hate the Cowboys. But one thing I can say about this is they haven't been relevant since the season after this, but that's besides the fact. I would like to point out, though, that I do believe this team is completely interchangeable with the 49ers team above them. I do believe that you could kind of just flip-flop these two between each other, and it would actually make sense wherever they fall, no matter what happens. They were both really successful. This Dallas team would be led by the 3-headed monster of Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, and Michael Irvin. This would give Dallas the 2nd best offense that season. Not only that, but their defense would be led by, well, Charles Haley. I'm starting to see a pattern here. Anyways, while not having any award winners, they would have that season's league leader in rushing yards and touchdowns in Emmitt Smith. Michael Irvin would finish 2nd in the receiving yards category. The Cowboys would have the 5th best defense in the NFL that year, having the best rush defense in the whole NFL. The one area I believe the Cowboys had the Niners beat in was coaching. Dallas had a top 15 coach of all time in Jimmy Johnson. He inherited the team in 1989 and had one of the worst records of all time, going 1-15, but would single-handedly draft his own team and mold them into the dynasty they would become. In just 5 seasons, Johnson went from a 1-15 record to winning back-to-back Super Bowls. I don't know if that solidifies Jimmy as a top 10 coach, but I know for a fact it solidifies him as a top 15 coach. Anyway, I'm rambling. Dallas would finish his 92 season with a 13-3 record and would win the Super Bowl in a blowout fashion, 52-17 against the Buffalo Bills. Coming in here at number 3, I have another dynasty, just like the Cowboys, but this time it's going to be the 1978 Pittsburgh Steelers in specific. Now, from 1974 to 1979, this Pittsburgh Steelers team would win 4 Super Bowls led by Terry Bradshaw, and I do feel at least one of these four teams that won the Super Bowl 4 separate times has to be on here, and I believe the 1978 team was probably the best one out of all of them. Their franchise wouldn't fall off afterwards by any means, but their team would never see the same success again. Many could argue why Chuck Noll is a top 3 coach of all time, but no matter what you think, he's at least top 5. Having a top 5 coach of all time is already starting a good trend for your team. If that's not enough, maybe think about the fact that this 78 Steelers team went 14-2, won the Super Bowl against a different dynasty, that being the Dallas Cowboys, had the league MVP in Terry Bradshaw, and they had the number 1 ranked defense that season, which we know today as the Steel Curtain. Oh, and they also had the 5th best offense that season, led by, obviously, the MVP. But wait, there's more. Again, they would have 5 Hall of Famers on this offense alone. Names being Terry Bradshaw, Franco Harris, rest in peace, John Stallworth, Lynn Swann, and Mike Webster. They would have 5 more Hall of Famers on defense. Those names are Mean Joe Green, Donnie Shell, Mel Blount, Jack Lambert, and Jack Ham. 11 Hall of Famers total if you count the head coach. That season, they would have 5 players be elected to all-pro teams and have 10 Pro Bowlers. This team is the definition of an all-time great. Coming in here at number 2, this might shock some people, but I have the only undefeated team in NFL history to be here. That is the 1972 Miami Dolphins. They're incredibly famous for being the only undefeated team ever. I don't feel like this makes them the best team ever because, I mean, we'll go over it in just a little bit, but no matter what happens, this team is an all-time great. The Dolphins would have the best offense that season, scoring 385 points, and they would also have the best defense that season, only allowing 171 points. That would go for a point differential of plus 214 in favor of the Dolphins. They would be led by a top 5 coach of all time in Don Shula. I can do a deep dive into all-time coaches if you guys would like to hear or see that. Anyways, Shula would win Coach of the Year that year, obviously. Miami had a non-existent passing attack, but so did pretty much every other team. I mean, it was 1972 after all. But what they did have was 2 different 1,000-yard rushers, them being Larry Zonka and Mercury Morris. The Dolphins would have 4 Hall of Famers on offense, being the aforementioned Larry Zonka, also having Paul Warfield, Jim Langer, Larry Little as well. On defense, though, they only had 1 Hall of Famer, that being Nick Buoniconti. They would have 10 All-Pro players in all technicalities, and I say that only because voting and teams were very different in 72. Nonetheless, this team will go down as an all-timer because of the coach, players, and undefeated record, which still stands today. Now, if you've watched up until this point, you know I have the Dolphins at number 2, and number 1 is going to be even more obvious. It's going to be the 1985 Chicago Bears. And I guess, in my opinion, this is probably the most subjective list I can make. If you're around from any time and any era and anything, you can say that any team is probably the best team you've ever watched. But statistically speaking, I feel like this 1985 Bears defense is probably the greatest defense we've ever watched. Get out of here. Just a little taste of just how great this team was. In their 3 playoff games, they outscored their opponents 91-10. That's the craziest stat I think I've ever heard. Obviously, with this being the best defense of all time, they would have the number 1 ranked defense in the NFL that season. But many forget they also had the 2nd best offense in the league that season, led by Walter Payton. They would have 64 sacks as a team, and they would only allow 198 points in a 16-game season, which averages out to be around 12 points per game, which is truly remarkable. As an offense, they would score 456 points, second best in the league that year, which averages out to be about 28.5 points per game. They were outscoring their opponents by over 16 points each week. They would go 15-1 on the season, their only loss coming to the Miami Dolphins, and win the Super Bowl by 36 points against the Patriots. On offense, they had only 2 Hall of Famers, that being Walter Payton and Jimbo Covert, with Jay Hilgenberg being a slight miss. They had 3 Hall of Famers on defense, though, being Dan Hampton, Richard Dent, and Mike Singletary. Other star players you've probably heard in this team are William Perry and Leslie Frazier. They would have 11 All-Pro players this season and also have 9 Pro Bowlers, all while being led by defensive mastermind Mike Ditka at head coach.